Americans keep asking us if we are better off today than we were 4 years ago. So let's see if we can answer their question. 4 years ago, Donald Trump said he didn't take any responsibility.
I don't take responsibility at all
for the spread of the coronavirus on our soil. So it's worth revisiting his handling of the pandemic, which began 4 years ago. And then we can see if we were in fact better off then than we are now. Traveling back in time to the start of 2020, after he spent weeks ignoring security briefings on the coronavirus and refusing to lay out a social distancing strategy or a strategy of any kind, Donald Trump, who had 2 years earlier shut down both of the federal pandemic task forces Obama had established, made his first public comments on the virus on January 22nd, 2020. And this is what he said.
Have you been briefed by the CDC?
I have.
Are there words about a pandemic at this point?
No, we're not at all, and we have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China.
To CBS, we do have a plan, and we think it's going to be handled very well. We've already handled it very well. We're in very good shape, and I think China's in very good shape also. On January 24th, he praised China's efforts and transparency and thanked Chinese President Xi for his response to the virus. In fact, he spent much of January and February praising China before, of course, he realized he needed to blame China. On January 30th, the same day the WHO declared COVID a global health emergency, he said, "We have very little problem in this country at the moment. 5 cases, and those people are all recuperating successfully. But we're working very closely with China and other countries, and we think it's going to have a very good ending for us." He then spent the bulk of February dithering, downplaying, delaying, and denying, and that lost time meant we were slow in developing a test kit, which then led to testing shortages, and that meant the virus was able to spread undetected and unabated in many parts of the country for nearly an entire month. And yet, on February 24th, he tweeted that the virus was very much under control in the USA. When we hit 15 cases, he said his administration had done a pretty good job. And then within days, he infamously said that it would disappear like a miracle and that it was a Democrat hoax. On March 11th, he told the nation, "Testing and testing capabilities are expanding rapidly day by day. We're moving very quickly. The vast majority of Americans, the risk is very, very low." By the end of March, our economy had come to a screeching halt, but he was still painting a rosy picture of what was happening and what was to come by Easter. By the first week of April, there were 10,000 confirmed COVID deaths in the US. About a week later, that number was 25,000. That week, he tweeted, "Liberate Michigan," in response to the state implementing strict shelter-in-place orders. A week later, the death toll hit 50,000. It was also around this time that Trump and Jared Kushner reportedly discussed just letting people in the blue states die from COVID to help him politically. Just let them die. On April 24th, Trump held a press conference during which he infamously asked of medical doctors, "I see the disinfectant that knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning?" In May, as we hit 100,000 deaths and doctors and nurses were forced to reuse their masks due to shortages in medical supplies, Trump nonetheless insisted that the U.S. response had met the moment. And as the U.S. began to lead the world in COVID-19 cases and deaths, he returned to playing golf. He also said this: "When we have a lot of cases, I don't look at that as a bad thing. I look at that in a certain respect as being a good thing." By August, 1,000 Americans were dying a day. And Donald Trump said the following in an interview with Jonathan Swan: "They are dying. That's true. And it is what it is." All of this as Trump, who'd privately told Bob Woodward the disease was a killer that rips you apart, kept downplaying its severity and assuring Americans there was nothing to worry about. More people have died of COVID in America as a percentage or in absolute terms than any other developed country in the world. Over 1 million Americans have died so far. Multiple studies show that up to 500,000 of those deaths wouldn't have happened if Trump had just promoted masks and lockdowns through the year before the vaccine was available, and since then, if he'd promoted the safety and efficacy of the vaccines created during his term. 4 years ago, refrigerator trucks were spilling over with the bodies of dead Americans. 4 years ago, we were washing our groceries, stockpiling Clorox wipes, and readying for the Hunger Games in a quest to find toilet paper. 4 years ago, my friend was told over a voicemail that his father had died, that he couldn't come see him, that he couldn't have a funeral, that he just died, and they'd have to decide what to do with his body. 4 years ago, as tens of millions of Americans lost their jobs and spent hours in food lines, domestic violence skyrocketed, and school children lost precious months of education. 4 years ago, our economy was in shambles. Our country was in flames. Our loved ones were dying. And Donald Trump was golfing. We were in the middle of a global health crisis, the likes of which none of us had ever known. And we had a narcissistic sociopath, perpetually tantruming toddler with a level of depravity unrivaled in presidential history at the helm. And since the day Joe Biden took Trump's job, his house, his plane, and his Twitter account, he's passed an actual infrastructure bill and actually took on the pharmaceutical industry and won, and actually got Mexico to give us money for the border, all while this country has regained all the jobs Trump lost and then some. Our GDP and stock market are all-time highs. Our crime rates have lowered. Inflation is lowering. And not only are we energy independent, we are actually pumping more oil than any country has in history. All of this while we are no longer waking up bracing for the next horrific tweet, the next batshit statement, the next overreach of power, and the next assault on our rights and our democracy itself from a traitorous sexual predator so petulant, so hateful, so angry, so willfully ignorant, so vain, vengeful, retributive, racist, sexist, bigoted, and mean that he embodies all that we teach our kids not to be. So no, to answer the question, we were not in fact better off 4 years ago. Not by a fucking long shot.